La 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 la. Musings over MMOs with Balthazar3457. Hey YouTube, so this video is just going to be me talking about random stuff that I think about games like World of Warcraft, focused mainly on what I think is wrong with them and what I think could be done better, in my opinion on how it could be done better. Because, as I always say, if you criticize without having your own solution to add in, your opinion is worthless. Today's topic of discussion is going to be reputation factions. Reputation faction grinding in World of Warcraft is boring. This is a fact, and they tend to be boring in quite a lot of games, but one of the most boring games would be World of Warcraft in terms of how the reputation grinds and factions are set up. In fact, for those uninformed, reputation grinding in World of Warcraft became so boring that in the most recent expansion, rewards for specific classes were divided up and split into a pattern amongst the various factions to force people to grind for the items they needed from each, because there was zero motivation for people to do the grind unless they really required the faction's rewards in order to play properly. Like the best-in-slot helm enchants that were split between the factions. At least by the time we reached Cataclysm. Now, I can name a faction that was done better, one from World of Warcraft, and that was Netherwing from Burning Crusade. People did that grind, and it was one of the hardest grinds of all back in the day when its quests were buggy, because they got mounts from it, and one of the daily quests was actually really kind of fun. There were also other options to speed up this grind if you were impatient, rather than forcing everyone to conform to a set schedule. This was removed in Cataclysm, of course. Once again, an increase to the bore factor. Technically, we could use Wrath as an example, but Cata is the most recent, so we'll stick with that for the sake of illustration. You know, my main problem with reputation grinds is just the fact that they are so boring, and that all the rewards nowadays seem to be gear that you need, not items that you want. It makes rep grinds feel more like a chore rather than effort being contributed towards a reward, especially when it sells items that you require in order to play and gear your class properly, like the best-in-slot helm and shoulder enchants. It's just insane to me. Here's an idea I had from back before I went to the hospital. I was actually planning on making this series of videos way earlier. In fact, I started it many months ago with the Replace Gear Score with Class Quests and Account-Bound Attunements video, but hey, that's life. So I was pondering reputation grinds one day, shortly after Cataclysm came out. I noticed that I had to rep grind all of them if I wanted the gear and items that were sold by them, but each only had one or two items that I wanted. This was on my DK. Not long after that, I noticed the exact same thing on my Warlock. This is when I discovered something. I had absolutely no enthusiasm to attain reputation for any of the Cataclysm factions. Their rewards were just being divided up to force people to grind each. The only perceivable reason to do this was because of an utter lack in ability to motivate people to do it themselves. Like I said, I think this is because the rep rewards are gear someone needs, not items someone wants. They're doing it because they have to play efficiently and obtain the best-in-slot items, not because they want reputation for specific rewards. And before some dumbass says that without practical rewards people won't rep grind, look at Bloodsail and Netherwing. People still do those even today, even though Vanilla and BC are long gone. That said, Skyshatter's riding crop was pretty nice for my lock back in the day. It's a shame they nerfed him. You know what my favorite faction was in Wrath of the Lich King? Sons of Hodir. I loved their rep grind, but that's because of one daily quest. I skipped pretty much every quest once I unlocked this one specific daily. Sons of Hodir offered a unique mechanic in that they offered one really hard daily quest that awarded double gold and double reputation. For that quest, you had to go out into a valley, hop on the back of an elite proto-drake, and wrestle with it in the air while it tried to buck you off and make you fall to your death. After a while, it would try to eat you and start grabbing a percentage of your health every couple of seconds. I was very upset when they nerfed this daily and made it easier, and I wish they would turn Heidel's Meat into a daily quest too. When I first did the Heidel's Meat quest, I expected it to turn into a daily, and I was sad when that didn't happen after I had completed it. For those unfamiliar with Storm Peak's quests, for the Heidel's Meat quest, you had to jump from back to back of different proto-drakes about 400 feet in the air and try to knock off the drake's rider, and if you got knocked off, you'd fall to your death. Now, what's so special about these two quests? They're not boring. They're interesting quests. They're fun quests. They were difficult quests, and I know for a fact that if people had an option of doing mind-draining dailies, or doing one really difficult but really fun daily that awarded more rep and gold for success because of the increase in difficulty, way more people who nowadays don't enjoy rep grinds might actually enjoy it. I know I would enjoy it more, so one of the bore factor reasons is that these daily quests are just dull nowadays. The other issue, apart from the grind itself being bland, is that these rewards are often also bland, at least in Cataclysm. Did I ever grind for a faction in Cataclysm that I didn't specifically need a piece of gear from? No. Did I do it in Burning Crusade? Yes, I did. So we need better rewards. Now, I am going to pitch an idea that I had. I originally came up with this for World of Warcraft, but honestly, at this point, it wouldn't bother me if any MMO used it. What I was thinking was faction spells and cosmetic set appearances, kind of like racial abilities, but faction reputation based instead. And if you're a Cataclysm baby, don't think this means one guy grinds all the factions and gets 10 new spells. That's not the way it works. This model is based off of the old Ravenholt versus Syndicate and Steamweedle Cartel versus Bloodsail model. You get rep with one, you don't get the rewards of its opposing group. I'll give you an example of the first faction I came up with. I came up with this idea actually a really long time ago, but nowadays, if you're familiar with Guild Wars 2 and its world versus world versus world, you'll be familiar with this idea. And what I came up with was basically a smaller scale version that wasn't quite so server versus server and more like faction versus faction that could be comprised from different servers. Think like a battleground such as Alterac Valley or like Wintergrasp, but make it 3-way instead of 2-way. And faction-based, not Horde or Alliance-based. What I came up with was to create 3 PvP factions that each had their home territories that could be attacked, and an important central zone, and be a big PvP zone with dalies and such, kind of like Wintergrasp or the old Alterac Valley quests. So these would be 3 PvP factions. I came up with PvP factions because they seem to be factions that are sorely lacking in World of Warcraft at the moment. PvP factions are still neglected to the point where they might as well not exist. Does anyone remember Silverwing, Warsong Outriders, Defilers? Those guys get no love. So I was thinking, how can we make these factions more fun to play, more appealing for people to do a rep grind for? So we come to the point of my idea, which is faction-based racial abilities. You side with one of these 3 factions, which is a choice made independent of Horde or Alliance. You get the low ranks of the racial, and it improves with you as you gain more and more reputation. I came up with this idea just after Cataclysm came out when I made a Goblin ult. I noticed that once you were past level 20 or so, the Goblin rocket attack racial was useless except to tag something at range because it did so little damage. Really, who's ever going to use this spell? I can't imagine it does any significant damage at max level, because I've never seen a Goblin use that spell on me in a duel, or in an arena, nor do I remember ever seeing it used in a raid by a Goblin. So my guess is a lot of people don't even have the Goblin attack racial on their spell bars by level 85. So if I had my way, PvP faction racials would actually be useful and significant and would do a substantial amount of damage. So here's a template faction I came up with and some of their rewards. The name is kind of lame, but it's arbitrary, subject to change. So these guys are the Blood Followers. They basically worship the blood god Hakar, and if I had my way, they'd worship Khorne, but we all know Blizzard would get sued for that, so Hakar it is. Their main base area is a castle with blood pits in it that if you fall into them because you are auto-running, you die. You have daily quests for these guys to kill PvP targets and collect blood for the Blood God and skulls for Hakar's Skull Throne, which are auto-looted into your inventory as currency on Honor Kill. There's daily quests to perform rituals where you sacrifice prisoners to the Blood God. When you do this quest, you get a buff to increase reputation gained from killing targets that give experience or honor. Their color theme for their gear sets is, of course, based around red. They have 2 racial spells, one of which is accessed on friendly reputation when you side with them initially, and the second is unlocked at Exalted. Both of these are instant cast, and they share a 2-minute cooldown. So the first spell is Blood Plague. This is a damage over time ability that spreads to other targets nearby if the target that has it dies while infected. This gets more and more powerful as you increase your reputation and eventually turns into a fairly substantial dot that you might use to open with. The second spell, unlocked at Exalted, is called Transfusion. It works like a big lifesteal combined with a Warlock Soul Swap spell. You use it once to steal life from an enemy, damaging them, and then you can cast it again, and whatever you did damage for, you can heal yourself or a buddy for. This is supposed to be a fairly substantial heal. Now these racial spells are not based off of spell power or off of gear, they are based off of reputation, and can be further improved depending on how many people you've been killing in PvP recently, which basically applies like a 24-hour-long buff. And eventually it caps out so you can't one-shot people with it. You can use this method to make your friendly level spell do the same damage as an Exalted level, just the same if you PvP enough. You could get it off of non-player targets too, but they're not worth as much as PvP targets would be. It's kind of like how the old Blood Elf racial worked, but not useless. They'd be patched to be more substantial as new gear comes out, and once you hit Exalted you gain access to some PvP gear and the faction's cosmetic gear. So these are spells that you'd want to keep on your hotbar for the full expansion, but aren't ridiculously OP. Another faction reward I came up with, apart from titles for Exalted players like Blood Champion or something, was a weapon enchant. I called this enchant the Essence of Hakar. I dislike the way weapon enchants currently work, and I find that most weapon enchants nowadays just provide some bonus stats. I think that that's really kind of boring, and that weapon enchants need to be more interesting. So once you're exalted, you can put the Essence of Akar weapon enchant onto your weapon, and this is an enchant that only exalted players are allowed to use. I'll read off for you what I've written down. The Essence of Akar possesses the weapon of the wielder, giving it a bright red glow and making it drip blood. This grants lifesteal, damage, and healing on attack, and if an enemy player goes below 15% health, the blade will go into a blood frenzy, revealing the nearby player if the player is stealthed, dealing a small amount of life drain over time to targets nearby while in blood frenzy, and granting the wielder a 15% movement speed bonus while under these effects. The enchant has another benefit, Bloodthirst. When the player lands a killing blow or gets an assist for a kill, honor kills, they receive Bloodthirst stacks, 4 for a killing blow, 1 for an assist. This increases the damage and healing and haste of nearby blood-aligned players within 40 yards, but the bonus goes up with each stack. When the weapon reaches 20 stacks of Bloodthirst, the blade will become satisfied and can be used to summon a Bloodthirster demon. The wielder of the weapon turns into a Bloodthirster, similar to how a Warlock's Metamorphosis works, and the player gains control over the Bloodthirster. This cannot be dispelled, and they gain unique Bloodthirster abilities, and so it works sort of like a vehicle does. There's also a caster-healer version of this that steals souls rather than blood. Anyway, that's the main idea I had for that one PvP faction, the Blood Followers. I think the faction would be more interesting, more fun to play as. I haven't thought much about the other two factions. I've given some consideration to what one could be. I was thinking a combination between the Protoss and the Strogg. The Strogg are basically a more awesome version of the Borg. Basically, their base would be, you go through a portal on the ground and you teleport up into space onto a big mothership that's in orbit above the planet, and if you get sucked out in airlock, you have to spirit res. I had a couple ideas for faction spells for them. One was to summon a combat drone from the corpse of a slain enemy, which can be assigned to guard another player, so you can give it, as a guardian to people, kind of like an Engineer's Compact Harvest Reaper. Another spell I came up with was what I called Nutrient Drain, which is a channeled spell that can be used on the corpse of a slain enemy to restore health and mana to the caster. Anyway, the other factions need further thoughts, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. Anyway, leave a comment. Say what you think about what you've heard thus far. I think it'd be good for the game if factions were more interesting. I listed PvP factions as an example, but that's mainly because PvP factions seem the most neglected. I do have a few ideas for more PvE-oriented ones. I'm curious what people think about having more daily quests like the Proto-Drake Wrestling quest. Personally, I think that maybe WoW would be a more enjoyable game if it had some of that style content added in. But let's hear what everyone thinks. I'm curious how people feel about it. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.